All right, does this work? Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So hello also from my side. I'm Adrienne. I'm leading the product team mobile at EyeEm. And I'm here today to share our experience about our Flutter migration and mainly how Flutter helped us to conquer our battles between iOS and Android. But before we get started, I would like to introduce you a little bit into what EyeEm actually is. So EyeEm obviously is all about photography. We're a community for photographers and people that simply share the same passion, which is photography. EyeEm also offers a marketplace where our creators can sell their images to big brands and agencies worldwide. We have just about over 25 million photographers, and people can download our iOS and Android apps in more than 150 countries around the world. And the main reason why people join EyeEm is because they want to improve their photography skills, they want to showcase their work and eventually earn some extra bucks. So let's take a quick look at into the app. So let me show you that. So the home screen is called Discover Feed, and it highlights curated content, also features photographers and magazine articles. So as you saw here, featured photographers and magazine articles, which give you tips and tricks on what to shoot or how to improve your skills and simply offer you inspiration. Another core part of our app are our so-called missions. These are photo contests, which we run either internally or they are also sponsored by brands. So how this whole thing works, our photographers, the community, they receive a brief. So you see this here on the screen. These are the missions. Here, for example, a mission we ran with Waze. They get a brief, they go out shooting, they submit their images, and then we pick the winners and they get prizes, they get featured, or they get their images licensed. So yeah, that's the app. And you might wonder, so what is actually going wrong here? We've been having these apps for quite some time, but why do we want to change it? Let's look into some of the issues that we are facing. So first of all, we have this classic team structure divided into an iOS and an Android developer team. Writing every feature twice, doing QA twice, and obviously also the maintenance is quite expensive. But it's not only time consuming on the developer side, also for the rest of the team. So if you're looking at the PM, designer, and QA, they're actually running a Scrum process with the Android team and then a second one with the iOS team. So you have double sprint plannings, you have double retros and all that. So that adds up to being quite expensive and has a lot of effort. The second issue that we're facing is feature imparity. So due to different development paces and architecture choices, our apps drifted apart and created a significant feature imparity over time. So Android was mostly faster to deliver and iOS was struggling with legacy code. And that put a lot of pressure on Android to build things, to build additional features so that they can run experiments and do A/B tests. And iOS was constantly pressured by deadlines and missing features to catch up with the Android speed. So we see here a few examples, even though some of the things, they look pretty similar, but the functionality behind it or the UI goes pretty far apart. Here in this case, it's the suggested tags, which is a feature we don't even have on iOS, semantic tagging it's called. Here where, we see different navigations, different patterns, design patterns that we're using, but then sometimes even completely different features. So issue number 2 is feature imparity. But we also have issues on the technical side. not only are we dealing with quite some tech debt and we're spending a lot of time with refactoring, this was mainly on iOS, but we also reached a point where the tech stack got outdated on both platforms, on Android and on iOS. Declarative UI is definitely the next big thing to go for. This became clear, especially since Apple announced their new UI framework, Swift UI, and Google announced Compose, both last year. So it became clear to us that our tech stack will get outdated pretty fast, and all the UI we are building now will be rendered obsolete because we will need to rebuild them. Yeah, and last but not least, we have this ongoing battle between iOS and Android. It's a constant comparison of the two teams. Like really looking at which team is doing better in terms of development speed, crash-free rates, app ratings, features, who runs how many experiments. So our two teams, like our mobile team, didn't actually look like a team. It looked more like this, like a battle between the two. So yeah, here summarizing our 4 big issues, and we had to take a decision. How are we able to fix this? We knew we wanted to go with a cross-platform native solution because that allows us to write the app in the same code base. So we are able to share the code between iOS and Android and still have a native experience. Our decision was to go with Flutter. Flutter is an open source UI SDK by Google, as you probably know. It is designed for building beautiful apps. It gives you control over every pixel and screen, which makes it sure. So by that, we were going sure that our UI is consistent and error-proof. Furthermore, it's fast. It's powered by the blazing fast engine, which Google also uses for Android and Chrome. It's very productive. There are features like the hot reload that lets you make changes on your running app and you see the results in real time. And very important for us, it's open source. So it has an ecosystem with thousands of packages covering everything from Firebase to Google Fonts and basically everything that our developers needed, everything that is important to them. Yeah, so we knew we would go with Flutter, but how do we start? The first part was easy. So we have this team, and the first step, we need to merge the teams. We need to have a united team. So, okay, we're going with this one mobile development team. By that, we already had the solution. We have only one UI specs. We have one Jira board for the entire team, one code base, and also one Scrum process. So the non-developers didn't need to do double Scrum processes anymore. So the outcome here is our united team. Next, we wanted to make sure that we are well prepared with our design specs. Because we knew we would build a lot of screens when we migrate to Flutter. Every single screen needs to be built. With reusable components, it's easy to build those screens in a consistent way and at the same time being very fast. So with Flutter, we knew, okay, we will need to rebuild everything. So this was an opportunity to do it right from the beginning. So we said, okay, we will do this from the beginning on before we jump on coding the features. We are building our design system. So first we only added the main components, such as the main headlines and buttons and input fields. And as we moved forward, our component library grew bit by bit. So we managed to build a unified adaptive widget system on top of Cupertino and material packages, so that moving forward with the Flutter migration, our code, we are able to make sure that our code looks the same on both platforms, but still act natively. So this spending time at the beginning on this design system really saved us a lot of time further back. But what did we do after we had the teams merged and had our design system in place? We had to figure out how to migrate the entire app to Flutter. Usually there are two ways how you can handle this. You either build the app from scratch and release it with one big bang, or you figure out a way how to add Flutter to your existing app. And for us, it was pretty clear that we will not rewrite the app from scratch. So what about this big bang? We will not have a big bang. And that's okay, because we have reasons for that. So first of all, the issues we saw, or the big risks that we see with that, would be there's too much uncertainty. Our app is quite big. To rewrite that from scratch, we have uncertainty about release dates, about effort estimations, but also another big problem is we don't have any updates on the App Store and on Google Play for quite a long time. And yeah, last but not least, there's no user feedback and data coming in if we don't release anything to the app. So instead, we wanted to add features gradually and maintain an agile, iterative approach. But yeah, that was, we decided that and we thought, oh yeah, sounds easy, but it's not easy. It was, we really had to figure out how to add Flutter to an existing app without breaking the rest of the app, which is not on Flutter yet. One big challenge that we were facing was the problem about the technical dependencies. We've spent a whole full day workshop to get a clear overview of our technical dependencies. I will not go in details here. I will just highlight one part of this. So for example, if we're starting with the navigation, we have this main tab navigation, which again is dependent on all the main tabs in the app: the Discover feed, the Following feed, the Tasks and News feed, the Missions overview, and the Profile page and Album pages. This is actually the core of our app. These are the most important screens, but they are all dependent on each other. So it's really hard to build that at once. It would take months. And then if you go further, the Following feed again is dependent on the photo detail page. So you would need to have that as well. The mission is also dependent on photo details. Discover feed on the mission page. So you see there is a lot of dependencies. And this would bring us, that's what we first had after we saw what are our dependencies, we came to this really ugly waterfall roadmap. And the worst part about that is that all the core elements of our app will come at the very end. So we're doing things blindly for months, and only at the very end we're getting to the core elements. So we made a decision that helped us to stay in an iterative, agile development cycle, but still be able to add features to the App Store gradually. So here's what we did. We have our core production app, the EyeEm app, which is available on the App Store and Google Play. Here we're adding all those features that don't have dependencies to any higher screens. So for example, onboarding is an isolated set of screens by itself, same as market sign up, and settings is something that comes very far down in the app architecture. It doesn't have any dependencies on other screens. So these are the things we're able to add to our production app. But the big main features, Discover feed and so on, all the things I mentioned, we are not able to launch these on the App Store because they would all need to come together. So we have this standalone app, which we started developing in parallel. We call this app EyeEm app. So here's how our process looks like. Everything, we started with the design system, as I mentioned before. If we're now building a new feature that has components which are not yet available in the design system, we start with that. So we first write those components. Then we check, is this a feature or a screen set that has dependencies, or is it possible to release that to the App Store? So here then you see that it goes into two streams, either the production app or the IMX app. So everything that goes into the production app, we gradually roll out, we gather quantitative data, we're able to do everything as we would do normally when we didn't work on Flutter. But then in parallel, we have this IMX app where we roll out the new features to our beta version, which we then distribute via TestFlight and Google Play Beta. So this is not something that will be available for our community, for the entire community, but we use it to run user tests with small beta groups. And mainly also a big reason why we have that as well is to be able to do gradual QA, gradual testing of the app. So if we now, I would like to give you one example of one feature set that we already migrated to Flutter and see how we handled it. It's something we launched not too long ago. It's the sign-up flow. So I will first show you how the sign-up flow looked on the native version on iOS and Android. It was one of these examples where we drifted very, very far apart. So we had a welcome screen both on iOS and Android. On Android, we were able to scroll through it. It had different value propositions displayed to you. On iOS, we didn't have that, but we had instead a walkthrough. This is something we launched many years ago and we never touched it again. Also, this is one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning where Android was often faster in their development speed and they tried out new things, and on iOS it was still not developed. So we had that walkthrough. Then we had the account creation, which was on iOS a form on one screen. Also, as you see, the Facebook sign up button is only available at this point, whereas on Android it comes to the first screen already. But the account creation on Android was a 3-step flow. And then last but not least, there's the market sign up, which were kind of similar, but still had very different designs. So we knew that this is something we will build from scratch and really want to polish designs across both platforms. So let's look at the new designs. We have simplified the sign up flow quite a lot. This is on Android, on iOS, this is on Android. It looks very, very similar. The design is almost the same, but there is still the difference that we're supporting iOS and Android specific requirements, such as on iOS you see continue with Apple, and on Android you see continue with Google sign up. But besides that, it becomes very obvious how nice and smooth it is for us to share the code and to share the design components between the two platforms. So the question might be, okay, what were actually the results after we launched this? So I would first like to share some numbers on that, because that's when a new feature goes live. We usually compare it with the version before, and then it's always very exciting to see, okay, did it have a positive effect or not? So we checked the sign up conversion rate. So that is the account creation conversion rate. Funnily enough, on Android, there was no change at all, but we already had a pretty good conversion rate on Android. On iOS, we had a horrible conversion rate. We haven't touched those screens for a quite long time, and we managed to increase it by 44%. The second metric we're looking at is the success rate. So people completing the entire flow versus churning somewhere on the way. And that had some nice improvements on both sides, on Apple and on Android. But besides that, it's also important to look at the other things. This was one of the first things we launched with Flutter, and the big wins on that was we had a simultaneous release on both platforms. Before we had Flutter, we never had that. We never were able to launch the features simultaneously at the same time. Also, we had to double the engineering power, so we were faster with our iterations. We have single UI, single QA, and single code. And last but not least, we're saving costs by going with this approach. So by now we have about 40% of our app migrated to Flutter. So we still have some way to go. So it will still take us until we're able to migrate the IMX app, to integrate the IMX app, which runs in parallel to the core app. Once all those features are added, then we're able to migrate them. So yeah, 40% done, but like looking back at our experience so far, it seems like it was definitely a good choice to go with Flutter. I would totally do it again, and I would totally go with this parallel development approach again, because dependent on how big your app is, EyeEm was quite complex in the set of features it supports. I think this is the only way to really go without locking down development, or the releases on the App Store and Google Play completely, and also to continue to get user feedback. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. I'm also, if you want to discuss anything further, I shared my email address here in case anybody wants to connect. I'm happy to talk about any product topics anytime. So thanks a lot. And if you have questions, now is the time.
Awesome, great. Thank you. Thank you, Adrienne. So let's see. Anyone has a question? Jens was first. Go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting. I didn't fully understand. Do you have two apps now in the stores running in parallel, and you can switch between them depending on features, or are they not connected at all? And the other question would be, mobile developers are sometimes a bit peculiar. Were they all fine with changing to Flutter, or did you have internal fights to?
I hope this question wouldn't come, but okay, it's a very valid
it's natural.
question.
We all know.
Very valid question. Okay, let me first answer your first question. So the IMX app is not launched on the Google Play and App Store. It's only a beta version, which we launch on Apple's test flight. So only limited users get access to that, and same on the beta version on Google. So it's not live. But to have this in parallel, we're able to, with the beta user group, we're able to do qualitative user tests, to do usability tests, to figure out what issues we have before we're actually migrating it to the main app. And also another big reason is that we're able to do QA already on the IMX app. So this standalone app, which is not available publicly, we're able to test features bit by bit before they all get migrated into the core app. The migration step can only happen at the very end, when all the dependencies have been solved and the IMX app is complete. And so does that more or less answer your question? And then I would...
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and then the second question, no, not all developers were happy about that. We did have, it was a quite long process to decide whether we should move to Flutter or not. Our lead mobile developer started with a prototype. He was really interested in about the Flutter framework. He wanted to get himself into the whole thing and figure out how things work, also start to work with the Flutter community. He was very active on that, also sharing his own code. And then the first prototype was ready. It was shared with the rest of the development team, and not everybody was happy. I mean, on the iOS side, there were concerns about losing native feeling of the app, maybe also not having this this Apple thinking anymore. So having access directly to Apple's UI APIs and so on, but suddenly use a new programming language, share the code with the Android developers. So there were a lot of heated discussions, but at the end, we were weighing pros and cons. We also had opinions from other people coming in. Of course, our CTO was involved in this whole decision and at the or in the whole discussion, and at the end a decision was made. We went with it, people got adopted, and I would say the team is happy about this now. Yeah, maybe there are still some small concerns, but overall the team is happy, and the concerns they had at the beginning, most of them were proved to not be such big problems.
Can you give us a rough
Thanks.
a number of how long that took? You said it took quite some time, this whole process.
Yeah, so the decision process, I think the prototype was being done last year in April, and it was shared with the team a few weeks later. And then there were the discussions going on for 2 months, then 2 months, then another month, nothing, silence, no decision made, nothing moving forward, no talking between the teammates. So it really it was not the best situation. But then I think in September, I don't want to say wrong dates here, a decision was made, and then we said, okay, we will move forward with Flutter, and the first project was built in October. So it was about 6 months almost. We didn't work on that the entire time. There were 2 months of just not talking about it anymore, and then we were moving forward, and now we are moving forward quite fast if Kurzarbeit wouldn't be in the way, because that's also affecting us. But before Kurzarbeit came, we were like, tuck, 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 we have a design system library, so we can add features much faster than we did before.
Nice, thank you. Samuel, I think you were next. Try to keep the queue in my head.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, hi. Yeah, I was wondering because as you said, at some point, if you go into the process of grooming new features, at some point you have to make the decision, right? Is it an EyeEm feature or is it an EyeEmX feature? Mm-hmm. And an EyeEmX feature being something that you will develop or that will only deliver value significantly later. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I would assume your bias very much towards prioritizing features much higher that you can release right away. So how do you, or how did you encounter this factor into making smart decisions as for allocating resources between EyeEm and EyeEmX features?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question, because I had that one slide where I showed this very long waterfall-y process where the most important features came at the very end. And this came exactly because of the factor that you just mentioned, that those not so important features, but the ones that don't have any dependencies, they come at the very beginning. They can get launched to the App Store, but they don't deliver that much value. So then when we started with the split between the production app and the EyeEmX app, we also split our team. So it doesn't mean that we're back to having two teams that work against each other or something, but we have two teams where one team works on the production app and the other team works on the EyeEmX app. So the EyeEmX app, we are able to add features in any order. It doesn't matter, because the dependencies are obsolete in that EyeEmX app. For example, just to give you an example, we already built our new navigation. The navigation has the core pages, the core screens of the app. So the Discover feed, the Following feed, the profile, some other. The Discover feed and the Following feed, we were building those at the first screens on IMX, but the profile page is not there yet. We haven't even started with the profile page, but we were still able to already launch the other two. And if you go to the profile page, it's just an empty screen that says, yeah, this feature will come later. And since we're only sharing that with a beta community, this is fine. We can communicate to them. This feature is not here yet, but you're already able to test out the Discover feed and the following feed. So that's why we are very flexible on IMX, and we are adding the features with most value. We're actually adding them at the beginning so that we have time to gather feedback on them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
So effectively, you actually did a similar thing that what Ben presented earlier, right? You just framed it a bit differently. Like it was, Urban Sports also launched a beta program, whereas you didn't call it beta, but you actually said, okay, this is IMX, but essentially it was like a step-by-step thing of features.
Yeah, the only difference, so I also thought when Ben explained that, I thought that's a very interesting approach because it is pretty similar to what we have on IMX. The only difference, I think, is that we are not replacing our old app and will then launch the IMX, but we keep the main app. We have still monthly releases on that main app. And once we reach the point where the IMX app is done, we're plugging that into our main app. So there will not be this replacement. And there will not be a big bang either, because the users already get updates to the, to the settings pages, to the onboarding, and those already have the new design system in use. So they already see our new designs. So at the moment, it's not consistent. Our app at the moment is not consistent because we're adding it bit by bit.
Cool, thanks. So I think next was, and I hope I pronounce your name correctly, Yense. You're clapping. I'm not sure if that's a clap or if that's a...
It might be a clap. That's one of my co-workers. Hi, Yense.
Oh, you could also ask a question if you want. Okay, then let me jump to the chat.
Actually, now that Yendre is here, I also need to give claps to him because he was working on this project at the very beginning and he set a lot of these things up, and he was also part of these this decision process that we had in place last year. In those months, I was out on maternity leave and Yendre took over. So I'm happy that he's here.
Nice. So that also plays into the next question from Florian, actually a bunch of questions. He asked whether you hired specific Flutter developers. First question, maybe let's read them out first. Second one was if you kept the native developers, how long did you onboard them to ship code, like to be productive? How long did it take? And did you reduce mobile developer team size with the unified app?
Yeah. Okay, so the first question, no, we didn't hire new developers. We kept our existing ones. What's the second question about how long it took until they got productive?
The native devs to be productive on Flutter, basically.
Yeah, so Flutter is written in Dart. It's a language that especially our Android developers were able to adapt quite quickly. And our mobile developer lead, who was also doing the prototype, he was in it completely, so he didn't have any issues with that. And once the decision was, okay, now we start with the whole team, the other Android developer got onboarded quite easily. With the iOS developers, the learning curve might have been a little bit longer, but they got adopted to it as well. And our team size, we didn't shrink it, but now we do, since a while, we are working only with 3 instead of 4 developers because we have one person being on sick leave for a longer time. So even though this was not planned, but yes, at the moment we are working with less developers. We used to have 4 and now we have 3. And with the 3, we are currently moving faster than we moved with 4 before we went to Flutter.
Interesting. There's a question from Mar around your design system that you presented. The question is whether it's public and also what tools you used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're using Figma to build the designs, and then the developers take the Figma files and turn them into their Flutter widgets. And it is not publicly available, but who knows, maybe, I don't know, that's a good idea actually. So a lot of our code is publicly available, but not our design system.
Yeah, I guess you two should talk, because Mar has a lot of experience in design systems.
Okay, interesting, nice.
Lauren also asked, when you started building IMX, I think you answered that question like late last year, right? September?
Yeah.
Okay, one question from Solja. Usability tests are usually not part of test flight tools. Do you use a different product solution for that, like for user tests or usability tests? Something that works remotely, or?
Yeah. Yeah, so it depends on which stage we are. Sometimes we're testing very early prototypes before they're actually coded. Can't think of the name right now, the app where we distribute that. Doesn't come to my mind right now. I will follow up on that later. Mm-hmm. But then also when something is coded, or actually there is also now, because normally we used to invite people to our office to watch them how they use our app. So we normally give them a device, and then we have 2 different app versions on it, and we compare how they work with the 2 versions, or even just 1 version, and we get qualitative feedback on that. And now during the Corona times, we started to do more remote testing, and there is actually, is it usertesting.io, I think it's called, that we started using more and more lately, where it's super easy to set up like A/B tests, for example, where you let the people run through a specific flow, and at each step you can ask certain questions, or you can track what is the button they click on. So that is actually a pretty nice tool where we have good experience with. Then TestFlight and the beta version for Google Play, we're using that to really share our beta versions with the community, and then we gather feedback in different ways. Sometimes we share the APK on Android, for example, and then we send along a Google form where we have specific questions, and then people answer via that. So we have different ways of how we gather feedback.
Mm-hmm.